All right, I think we're about ready to get started. Again, good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking your time this evening to join us to discuss traffic calming on Woodlands Avenue. My name is Jeff Hammond. I'm a consultant working for NDOT. You see down there in the lower right-hand corner, the Nashville Department of Transportation. Lon Lee with our team is also on the call tonight, as is Councilman Cortez. Always glad to have our councilman represent you on the calls. I'd take just a second, Councilman. If there's anything you'd like to address the group, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. It's good to see everybody. Thank you so much for putting all the effort into this, and I look forward to having the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, and thanks to your colleagues for your support of this program. We're going to do three major things tonight. One is I'm going to give you a little background about the program and how Woodlands got inducted into it. Secondly, we'll take a look at the very preliminary sketch that we've put together for what traffic calming might look like on your street. Lastly, we some about next steps and one with this and what you can expect to see from us over the upcoming weeks. If you may have gotten a little notice just a second ago that I did start the recorder. We do record these meetings, and one reason we do that is so that it can be available to you afterwards. If you have neighbors or anyone that wasn't able to attend with us tonight, this recording will be available here in the next couple of days on the NDOT Traffic Calming website. We'll share a link to that here at the end of the presentation. Just know that we do have a record of this, and you can share that with others. I think with that, we'll get going. I guess one other housekeeping thing, if you're not speaking, please keep yourself on mute. We give you the opportunity or ability to unmute yourself and welcome you to do that. Feel free. We're a pretty small group in these meetings. Feel free to unmute yourself, stop me at any point, ask a question, whatever you want to do. We also do keep this chat feature up, so if you'd rather type your question, that is fine too. We'll get started. Just a little bit about the traffic calming program. I think as we have implemented more of these, people, if they didn't know already, know better now than ever what traffic calming is all about. You may think of us as the speed cushion program. That's totally okay. That's a whole lot of what we do. We are a residential street program. We don't typically focus on more commercial or industrial streets. We focus where we know that speeding is really a quality of life issue. We do focus on physical solutions. That's as opposed to things like more speed limit signs or stop signs, things like that. We have found that nothing is quite as effective as at slowing speeds as something that you drive over or drive around. Some physical change to the street we find to be most effective, but we have other tools as well. We'll talk about those. We also do focus on speed reduction. That sounds obvious for traffic calming, but sometimes people engage this program hoping that we can shift traffic to some other place, just get it out of here. And that can be a byproduct when we do this. I don't think we'll see much of that with your street. You're pretty isolated. People there on Woodlands are pretty well belong on the street because they're going to some place in that neighborhood. But we really try to just focus on keeping traffic where it is, just slowing it down and getting it to drive a little more responsibly in our neighborhoods. We know that this is not the only way to solve what can be pretty unwelcome issue here of speeding. We do have great partners at MMPD on the enforcement side. We know that's a big part of slowing speeds down, but we also know that they're out there doing very difficult and very important work every day, and sometimes parking a cruiser and just dedicating big blocks of time to traffic enforcement is not always top on their priority list. That's certainly understandable, but they are proponents of the program and appreciate what we do on the engineering side. We also have some tools in terms of education, some of those that we have in our toolbox with this program, and others more getting messaging out. We're starting to see some of those public service type announcements about the impact of speed and please slow down and those types of things. So that has a place as well. But we focus on engineering and mostly at NDOT, who is the keeper of the right of way. That's what we have under our control. There's various reasons. I mentioned quality of life earlier. Certainly safety is the other side of that coin in terms of why we do this program and why I think there is such a demand for this program in Nashville. And this is just a graphic showing you one outcome of that. We've begun focusing more on non-drivers, other people using our streets, bicyclists, walkers, people using transit, those types of things. Because we know that's a very real and prominent use of our street. We want those people to be as safe as possible.
This was
And
actually,
we know that if we can slow speeds down.
Yeah, Jeff, this was actually in the previous meetings that you and I have had together. This stat was one of the most striking to me, to see the survivability rate change so drastically from 25 to 35 miles an hour. And then when you jump up to 45 to see it split even more. But I think it puts the conversation in good perspective when seeing some statistics like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Here in Nashville, we lose regrettably about 40 people a year to traffic deaths who are walking generally, sometimes bicyclists. But it is a very real statistic. And then we know that sometimes it just prevents people from using the street for anything other than driving. Some of you don't even want to go check your mail in the mailbox because of speeding traffic. We hear those types of things, and we know it's very real to people who are dealing with these issues. It does continue to be a very popular program. As of the selection cycle in which this one was brought in, we have a little bit more than this number. At this point, we were at 480. We're now well above 500 applications for streets just like this. And I only say that to say that you're in good company or bad company. You're not dealing with these issues alone. Certainly, it's very widespread. All corners, urban, rural, suburban, all different areas of Davidson County apply for this program to get selected to do these projects. Contrast that with what we're able to do. We're doing about 50 projects a year right now. We had a little surplus funds that council dedicated to doing some additional traffic calming a few months ago, but we're back to about 50 a year out of roughly 500 applications. So a long way to go. I see a question there about how Woodlands was identified for speed control solutions. I'm going to get there in just a second. But first, let me just mention Hub Nashville. It's a great resource. This, I guess, is as good a time as any to discuss it. If you're not familiar with it, you can call 311 and talk to someone, or you can log on at hub.Nashville.gov. And it is essentially the clearinghouse for all things metro government. We do have a twice a year speed calming application process. But certainly you can go in and you can make other types of requests at any time. Many of those actually dealing with NDOT and the service that provides. So I would encourage you to take a look at that if you're not familiar with it. It's a great resource for residents of us residents here in Davidson County. So here's how we were selected, or how your street was selected. This is the prioritization that we use. When we've got 500 applications, obviously we cannot serve all of those. And so what we try to do is identify the worst offenders, those streets that need this service the most. And this is how we come to that conclusion. About 70% of the scoring that we use are probably data that you would expect. That is the volume of traffic on the road, how many cars a day there are, and that is the speed at which they are traveling. Those are pretty obvious, and that's the bulk of the score. And by the way, every application that comes in, if we don't have the data already, we go out and collect this data. So if you have applied, we can tell you how fast the traffic is moving, how many cars a day there are, and so forth. The other 30% of that score has to do with some of those more vulnerable users we were talking about. 15% has to do with, is there evidence of a documented pedestrian crash on the street? 10% of the score has to do with, are there otherwise other safe accommodations for people? Are there bike lanes or are there sidewalks? And if you have neither of those, your score goes up. The theory being, you don't have any other way. You're walking in mixed traffic with cars, and it's not a very desirable thing. And then another small part has to do with trip destinations. Are you in a neighborhood where there's a school nearby, or a park nearby, or a library, or something that might generate more walking trips, for instance? And so that we take all of that data for every street that is applied for. We roll that into a composite score, and we rank those. And then we take that highest roughly 25 projects twice a year, and that's how you were selected. So congratulations or condolences, however you look at it. Woodlands Avenue was scored in the upper part of that list, and so that's why we are here offering this program to you tonight. The project that was requested and applied for, and where the data was collected, is essentially the whole length of Woodlands. I know we don't go all the way to Old Hickory Boulevard. We can discuss that, but formally we go from Windy Pine to Boxwood. That's about a half-mile long segment, and I'm going to tell you all this. It's hilly, and we're going to talk about that too. But the 85th percentile speed, which is just a statistical way we in the industry measure speed and talk about them, was 34 miles an hour. That just means that 15% of the traffic was going faster than 34 miles an hour on a posted speed of 25. You've got about 1,200 cars a day, a little more than that. Both of those are pretty average for the speed, for the data that we work with in this program. Nothing surprising about that. Nothing concerning about that volume of traffic. If anything, that might be slightly on the low side of streets that we traffic calm. I know 1,200 cars a day sounds like an awful lot. It is, but pretty typical for a street like yours. And then the street width is kind of interesting. It doesn't give us any real issues, but it is highly variable. Most of your street is very wide, as you know, about 38 feet wide. Once we get up toward the upper end, at the end of the project, it does shrink down to about 28, and then it shrinks again right toward the very end of the street there to about 24 feet wide. So it's just something we are aware of, and we'll have to factor into a design solution for the project. Here it is on a map, and I put a big yellow arrow on it because it's kind of faint there as I look at it anyway. You see a little pea green colored line there coming off of Old Hickory Boulevard. That's your street, and it's color coded certain ways, meaning certain things. That pea green color just means that we're kind of in the stage where we're at. We're working on your project. You've been selected into the program, and we're meeting with you and working out the design details of that project. You see several other pink lines on there. That just means that those streets, and I know you can't read those, it's really not that important, but those streets have been applied for. And so, by the way, this is an interactive map that you can access on NDOT's website. So if you want to get in here later and zoom in and look around your neighborhood, I'd encourage you to do that. And so you can get other information about streets that may have applied to be in the program. And then one other color I would point out is those blue dashed lines. You see that one at the top of your screen, I believe, is Huntington Parkway. Those blue dashed lines indicate places where we have already installed. Generally, we've already installed speed cushions. It may be some other type of traffic calming device, but there's something on that street. And that just gives you an idea. If you have not encountered these around Nashville before, you want to drive over and check those out. And it gives you some places where you might can do that. All right, let me go over a few of the tools that we have in our program. I mentioned this one. This is really the bread and butter of most of our projects that we do, the speed cushion. It is used actually now almost exclusively in Nashville. I'm going to show you some other things that might be available. And I know you all might have already had some discussions about others, but this is really what this program has come to focus on for a couple of reasons. One is it's very consistent. It's very dependable. It works. We know it works. we're comfortable with the results of it. We know how to place them. We know how they hold up. We know how people behave when they encounter these. It's just our most known performer in the traffic calming program. So we like them, and we like to propose these first, just because we know they work. They are only about 3 inches tall. Most people will tell you that's enough to bring about a slower speed. They're 6 feet wide. You see a brake there, and it may look like, well, I could just straddle those in my car, but I assure you, you cannot straddle them in your car. Even very large trucks are going to have to run over that speed cushion with at least one set of tires. And so they're 6 feet wide for that reason, just to make sure that cars cannot completely straddle them. However, there is a gap for the reason of very large wheelbase vehicles like ambulances and fire trucks, because we want to slow those emergency responders down as little as possible getting to the job that they have to do. So that's the reason why you see those brakes in there, and it's not one solid block all the way across the street. They come in different lengths as well. So it's 6 feet wide across the road as you would try to straddle it, but it's different lengths going in the direction of traffic. And we can get those in 7 feet up to 14 feet. The difference being how aggressive do we want to be. The 7 foot speed cushion is the shortest, and it is the most aggressive. So you ramp up and you immediately ramp back down. We really reserve those in our most urban neighborhoods, places like East Nashville or Edge Hill, places like that where we know there's a lot of pedestrian activity, very dense neighborhoods. The 14 footers have a couple of sections, and they're the most gradual. So that's going to yield us speeds that are, more like 25, maybe up to 30 miles an hour. We reserve those generally for places that are a little more rural in nature. Our go-to right now is right in between there. It's a 10.5 foot cushion, and we're using those in most places, kind of a middle of the road. And our target speed there is about 15 to 20 miles an hour at the location of the speed cushion. Of course, there's a little bit of acceleration, once you clear those, and a little bit of deceleration once you come up on the next set. We'll talk about that. But overall, we're seeing speed average out to about 25 miles an hour, which is the speed limit. You might note a couple of other features here. Sometimes you see these in sets of 2. Sometimes you see them in sets of 3. In the picture on the upper right-hand side, you see a yellow warning sign that accompanies most of our applications. In the bottom right-hand picture, you can pick out some little white flexible posts on the side of the street. All of those are different configurations that we can use just to prevent people from driving around these. We know that if we give enough space, sometimes even when we don't give enough space, people will do everything they can to avoid these and drive around them. We've had people driving in yards before. So we take great pains to make sure that does not happen, and we use some of these features just to further discourage that. It's been a while since we've had a lot of those issues. We've learned, and we've tailored our designs accordingly. But that's why you see those things. With a street being as wide as yours, we will need to continue to think about that. At 38 feet, it would not surprise me if we have to go to a 4 cushion wide configuration. We've done that before. It works fine. So we'll continue to work with that. A very close cousin of the speed cushion is essentially the same, but it is one solid piece all the way across, the speed table. We don't use these very often. Occasionally there will be some special considerations, like in parks. We've used those where emergency response is just not quite as much of a consideration. But other than that, works about the same. It is more material, but the performance of them is almost identical. We do have some before and after data on that. I think if you've ever driven these, you probably have just realized they do work. They do bring about slower speeds, but NDOT and their staff continues to evaluate these. Of course, different configurations change things. What the street, how fast traffic was traveling on the street before the speed cushions went in is a big part of it. But all in all, we're seeing somewhere around a 9 to 12 mile an hour reduction with the introduction of speed cushions. But I would say every street is different there. Another tool that we have that kind of gets into that educational type of a stance is the radar feedback sign. Again, these are probably things you've seen in areas near to you as you've driven around. It does what it says it does. It gives you, it shows your speed to you as you drive by it. So it's a radar there. It is solar powered, doesn't take a lot of wiring and things like that to power that.
I will
there
say,
is some before and after.
Can I interject one thing? I'm not going to name the person on the call, but I had a discussion with somebody, and they said when they see these, they try to gun it to see how fast they can go. I was like, well, we have a solution for that. We actually stop the feedback at a certain mile per hour, so people aren't tempted to do that.
I feel a little called out, Mike. Obviously, it's me.
He told on himself. That's okay. There used to be one of those over in the Green Hills area on Overhill that would actually show up a frowny face if you were going too high. My kids love to try and get the frowny. You know, they'd tell me to try to speed up, try to get the frowny face. So quit going that way. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. At a certain point, it just goes dark so that people don't try to register a 99 or something on there. Absolutely. You know, there's varying opinions on this. Some people swear by them and say it. I live on the street with these, and absolutely, it has made a difference. It makes a difference every day. There are people that say that. There are some people that say it makes absolutely no difference. People have not slowed down. So we're continuing to monitor those, especially the long-term effectiveness of them. We know they work in the short term, but the question is, as it stays out there for months at a time, do people kind of get used to it and ignore it or not? So still a good tool. We often use these where we can't use speed cushions. Things like steep hills, sharp curves, places where otherwise we might like to use something, you know, physical, something in the street, and just don't feel like it's the safest way to go about it. So it could be a good kind of stopgap measure. Sometimes what we'll do is introduce some pavement markings to effectively narrow the street. We know that wider streets typically are not a good thing in terms of the speed outcome. So the wider a street looks and feels, the more comfortable drivers are at going faster. And so sometimes we'll introduce things like edge lines to visually narrow that. We have to be careful with doing that, but sometimes it can be a good solution. Another striping change that we can do is typically more in urban areas, but we will introduce bulb outs. A lot of Nashville streets, and I think y'all have some of these, were built with really wide sweeping radiuses where two streets come together. It's called the radius, and the wider that is, it's common sense. You can make a turn faster. And so if we bulb those out with pavement markings, it usually requires something raised, like those flexible delineators to reinforce that you shouldn't just drive it. You have to go around those things. That can be helpful at intersections. The downside, you're probably seeing it in some of these pictures, it can look awful busy. And so some neighborhoods say that's, not for us, or it just kind of takes away from maybe the aesthetics, but in more urban areas, especially with bike lanes and on-street parking and things like that, it can be helpful. Chicanes is a little bit like that, except for more on tangent straight sections of the street. Again, this is a pretty special, generally more of an urban type of a treatment, where we can introduce an artificial meandering of the street. Works best if there is some on-street parking there, like you see in that lower picture, but we haven't done these in a while, but there are a couple of streets in Nashville that do have them. And then I think this is the last one, and one that we understand there might be some interest here in this neighborhood in the traffic circle. We do keep it in the toolbox. I will say we kind of go through phases about, whether we're doing them or not. For probably the past 3 years, we've done almost none. We've felt like there's some candidate intersections that it might work well, but NDOT has been a little hesitant to do some for good reason. And probably the main reason is because once we introduce these, there are some very real impacts to things like school buses, very large, long vehicles that have trouble navigating some of these intersections where a traffic circle has been installed. We continue to work with that. We have not taken it out of the toolbox. There are some, design features that we can do to mitigate that, handle those kinds of things. We've taken a look at this for your neighborhood, but we want to hear from you in terms of your thoughts on this or any of those tools that we have provided. So I wanted to define all of those before we talk about it, just so that if any of those come up in this discussion of what traffic calming might look like on your street, we're all working under the same understanding about what type of treatment we're talking about. This is, I hope you can see this and make this out. This is an aerial photograph of your street that shows a map, which this is the concept that we come to this first meeting with, to show you our initial thoughts about what a successful traffic calming project might look like on the street. As you might can tell, this is, as we typically present, a speed cushion based project. We have stuff out of my way on my screen. We have, I think, 4 locations of speed cushions, and let me tell you how we come up with that. We look at the whole length of the project. Again, we go formally from Boxwood to Windy Pine. We're also looking at that little section of Windy Pine to Old Hickory, because we know that's just sort of a continuation, an unbroken section of the street, but we're aware of that. We look at that distance, and then we break that up by what we think a good spacing would be. Our typical spacing, we'd like to be somewhere from between about 400 and 600 feet between sets of speed cushions. That makes them close enough together that somebody's not going to really, most people won't really step on the gas just to get to the next speed cushion, because they can see it right up there, and there's not much sense in speeding up. But it's not so close together that it just feels onerous and pushes traffic to some other street, or becomes the bane of y'all's existence, who has to drive over these every day. And so we know that if we're somewhere in that range, 400 to 600 feet, we'll have a good project, and that's our ideal. However, there are some limitations to that. One of the things that we look at are hills, as I mentioned, steep slopes, and you all have them. And what I did on this project is, on this map, is if you can make out the little yellow glowing portion of the street, those are places where I think we're probably going to exceed our available grade. We will not put speed cushions on any street that is steeper than 8% slope. We don't like to if it's greater than 6%. So we will pay attention to that, and I'm fairly confident that all of that you see shaded in yellow, it's going to kind of be off limits for speed cushions. So that's why I haven't shown any in those areas. That's the entire section. Let's see, that'd be south of Maple Song. So from the 4-way stop down to Boxwood, we've not shown any. Grades is one. Another one is driveways. And if you look at, the spacing of some of the driveways down in that southern part of the street limit, we may not could get any speed cushions in there anyway, because the driveways are so close together. We work really hard. We really have a policy, maybe it's a soft policy, but we don't violate it very often, that we don't put any speed cushions within 15 feet of someone's driveway. I don't think anybody wants to drive over these in and out, as you go into your driveway all the time. So we keep those far enough away. We do avoid horizontal curves, as you turn the steering wheel around a curve. I don't think we have any of those that are significant enough that they're of much concern to us. But those are the types of things that sometimes keep us from being able to get that perfect spacing that we're after. So that's how we lay those in. That's how we, at this project, have arrived at 4, but all of those being north of Maple Song. I'm gonna stop here, and I wanna open this up to you all who live on the street and witness things and tell us where you see things, what you see, your thoughts about what we've laid out here, your thoughts about Councilman Cortez has given us a good heads up that maybe there's been some discussion of circles. Where are you thinking about that? I really would like to take the opportunity to hear from you guys about what you're seeing on the street.
Jeff, I don't know if you can see the chat, but there are some questions and comments about ICE, specifically with the speed bumps. Do you need me to read them? I don't know if you can see it.
I can see it. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of, can you just sort of summarize those?
Sure. So we had a few comments saying that how will the speed humps affect the hill when it ices over in the winter, because the hill is very steep and there have been safety concerns and multiple accidents every time it snows in the winter and it ices every time. So they also suggested if they could set up any pedestrian traffic barriers to consider this problem. This seems to be a priority.
Okay. Yeah, let me address the snow. We hear that often, and this past winter was a good one. If y'all remember, we had a lot of ice for multiple days, and the salters. I don't know. Is your street salted? Are y'all plowed?
No, we're not.
No.
It becomes a salt sheet ice every time it's shaded
It's a
too.
big problem. Very big problem. Very dangerous. Do you have any sway?
Yeah.
Can you get us on the salt and plow list?
No, unfortunately.
During the last storm, I worked with NDOT days of because they had to move to an emergency system because it hit all 525 square miles of the county at one time. But we were able to get, whenever I got calls from the neighborhood, I think 90%, 95% of our extra calls. I know we got a plow in there a couple times, but by the time the ice hit, the plows makes it difficult. So they did salt Woodlands, but it was more on a per request basis as the storm was happening because of the emergency type situation. I'm working to get Holt added as a connector road, and I can ask for Woodlands. What makes it an uphill battle is because it doesn't connect anything else except the neighborhood to other areas. But we can definitely ask.
I think it's worth, asking as much as possible, especially for Woodlands Avenue and Windy Pine, just because of the severity of the grade. It is so steep. And I mean, we have 200 houses, a little over 200 houses in this neighborhood total, and everyone has to take one of those two paths to get to their home. So it's, every single house in this neighborhood is affected by those hills. And it really does. I mean, if you don't have a four-wheel drive vehicle, you're in trouble.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Like anything that we propose, makes it significantly better or worse from icy weather. Those things just happen. We do, the plow drivers do have GPS in their trucks, and speed cushions are added onto that route feature, so they do know when they're on a street with speed cushions, they can lift the blade up if they ever do have to plow it. But we work with them and they're aware of it. And then there was a question about, Lon, you had said the pedestrian barriers. Let's see. Could we set up I might need some clarification on the pedestrian for barrier, but put up a speed radar sign for education instead of speed bumps. That is certainly possible, and that's why we're here tonight, to just kind of hear that feedback.
Jeff,
about the type of treatment that you're interested in.
Yeah, to speak to the pedestrian path, just to speak to the width of the road, those sticks, obviously not the proper term, that are used in the bulb outs, could they be used to create a pedestrian walkway like a bike lane or a walk lane to help narrow the width of the street?
They can be, and some of y'all may be familiar with it, where that has been done over by Granbury School, not far from you. There's a little street down there off of Hill Road called San Marcos, I think, and a combination of those was put in some years ago. They've held up pretty well. It was a combination of kind of a rubber curbing and some of those, I think it has some of those delineators, those taller ones, to carve out a section of that street for kids walking to school or riding their bike or whatever. So it can be done. It's not something we do often as part of this, but I think that's certainly something that we can carry to, you know, if we know that these projects are often two things. It's speeding, but it's also that I don't have a place to walk on the street. I don't feel comfortable walking because of the speeding, but also because I don't have space. And so, yeah, that's certainly something that we could run past NDOT and see how they feel about that.
Yeah, would those?
Now, I would say,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let me just say one consideration to that. Say that goes in on one side of the street. I assume there is some level of parking. I don't know how much parking happens on your street, particularly in the evenings when people are home. So we just need to keep that into consideration. That, you know, if a pathway goes in on one side and we have to remove parking, you know, we got to come to some agreement about how all that happens.
Would you, to all the residents on Woodlands, I'm happy to push for that. Is that something you would like us to push for?
The level of construction vehicles that go up and down the street, those barriers last about a week.
Well, we'll make them pay for them if they're knocking them down.
Well, then maybe we could talk to the people at the top of the neighborhood who couldn't disrespect the lower part of the neighborhood anymore. Most of our speeders are either construction workers going to the top of the hill or people that live up the top of the hill that don't care about anybody on Woodlands.
I would say, like, looking at the Maple Song intersection and Cedar Way, it looks like the majority of to the point just made, that the majority of volume is coming from the top of the hill. Can we maybe get ball belts or something there that would slow them down?
Coming barreling ass down that hill.
Yeah, can we get Jeff? Would it be possible to get something up at the Cedar Way and Maple Song intersections, like ball belts or something, to slow it down beforehand, and then maybe a pedestrian walkway on the?
That road is so steep that will literally make that road impassable in winter. I mean,
Already
cars sliding
impassable.
down the entire hill.
At least they slow down.
Yeah, I will tell you, as a person that lives at the top of the hill, and I also walk my dog up and down all the way of the hill, I'm of two minds about this, because I don't want 4 speed bumps on the way down, but I do slow down because I am someone that also walks up and down the hill and I don't want to get hit. So we have a very large pedestrian line going all the way down. Personally, if it you know, came up for a vote, I would prefer barriers on that one side, the side facing the woods, and a radar checker. But I will tell you, not everyone up on Boxwood is disrespectful, because we are also the pedestrians going all the way down it, and we don't want to get hit either. I think we're all in this together.
And if you to the residents, if there's construction trucks speeding, let me know, because I can reach out to the builder and I can rattle some cages on that.
Mike, I'm not sure that would do a whole. I mean, there's so many individual workers. It's smaller. I mean, today there were cement trucks doing 50 miles an hour up the hill. Those things would take a mile to stop. I mean, let alone coming down the hill. But I live right in the middle of this hill, and and I will tell you, there isn't anybody that doesn't go up this hill, that doesn't live on this block right here, that doesn't go up that hill at least 40, if not faster. I don't care what anybody says. I see it every day. And I also see people use that bike lane or that pedestrian lane as a lane, going down and turning in front of the hill that goes down in front of the apartment complex, which is so dangerous, because those people are walking up that side of the road, and people come down that hill at 40, 50 miles an hour with 2 wheels in that lane. I can't believe nobody's been killed yet.
I guess one question on that. Has traffic ever considered painting the yellow stripe down the center? Because a lot of the time cars are going over the quote unquote the invisible center line that's not there into the other side. And that's why some cars get into the painted parking lane. Just 2 cents.
Yeah, to second that, I live up from Bob. When they repaved this and when they graded it down and repaved this asphalt, in order to mark the lanes off properly, they put a center line down, right? Because they wanted the white lines on either side to be equidistant. I will tell you, when that was dotted dash down the center, yes, it was temporary. I will tell you there was a dramatic slowdown around the curves and coming up and down the hill. I even went so far as to message Hub Nashville and be like, look, can you just bring the paint truck out, drop a white line down the center? It solves the problem. It's an easy first line of defense, right? It slowed people down. Did it slow them down dramatically like speed cushions? Absolutely not. But it absolutely did work. And it kept people from, exactly what he said, crossing over that line into the walk zones. Because people are trained to drive between lines. They're not trained to drive on wide open surfaces. So in general, it worked. And then the rain faded them away. And I can absolutely tell you, when they were gone, the speed came back.
Yeah, the dotted line went from the street lamp to the street light to all the way up the center to the stop sign. And so for the main section of Woodlands, and it was truly helpful at that time.
Yeah. And a combination could be had, right? If the lines were great, I agree with Bob, down that curve, some bollards where there literally is no one who parks, right? It's dead space. He's absolutely right. There's a blind curve down by the apartment complex, right about where you have the second cushion. It's a blind zone.
From the right.
From the right. It's a blind zone. People dip into that all the time. So bollards there and a line would absolutely keep people in, at least in their zone.
Yeah, that's great feedback. We did something similar to that on a project a couple times back, where it had a lot of hills, and it also had some of what we did there was we used, I think it already had a center line, but in this case we could introduce the center line, and then to keep people from kind of drifting over into that shoulder, for lack of a better word, we put just 2 or 3 of those delineators on the outside of those curves where that would have more of a potential to happen, just to keep people, in the street, in their lane, and hopefully in that slow them down. But you have probably enough curves here where we could do that at 2 or 3 places on the project and go about it that way. It wouldn't be a constant row of those things, but it would be maybe where they're most effective and needed.
And the commentary to the ice, it's if you don't have a continuous speed to get up this hill, you don't get up this hill. I don't care if you've got a Jeep. I watched big honking 4-wheel Jeeps. If they didn't keep a consistent speed as they came up the hill, they did not make it up this hill. And it's ice. And we are not on a plow plan, and we never will be, and that's fine. But if you don't keep a consistent speed and you have to slow down for a bollard or a speed cushion, I can definitely tell you we're going to end up with a bigger parking lot at the bottom of the hill than we usually do. And I hate that, because the last speed cushion towards that stop sign is about where we start to ramp vertically, clearly with the grade, right in front of my house. Actually, it's in front of my neighbor's house. It's a solid sheet of ice. It's a flat table. So if you don't carry your speed over that flat table of ice, you can't continue to climb.
Well, I was not concerned from a second to the right, because that's where cars start turning coming down that road, because I saw someone's Expedition got completely wiped out this winter at that turn.
Yeah, in front of our neighbor's house, we had 2 cars. We had 1 car end up in a natural garage because it slid down the hill, and it bounced off another car. So it's real.
So, Jeffrey, thank you so much for holding this, and Councilman Cortez, thank you. I just want to say that I really am guilty of driving too fast, and I really believe that this is going to be a positive thing for the neighborhood in terms of making it more safe. I recognize that it's probably an inconvenience for some of the people that live at the upper part of the of the neighborhood, but I am in favor of trying this and seeing how it affects. So I just wanted to kind of give my comments there.
Thank you. And in saying that, you're saying you're in favor of trying these speed cushions?
Yes, the cushions. Yes, I think the cushions would be a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I hear loud and clear those concerns about ice. I think that is something for us to think about. And you know, if we were to keep a cushion plan, pulling those back, kind of, you know, paying some attention to that there are just a few level spots here to get a little speed up in order to make that climb. So certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and now, so I actually don't live on Woodlands, so I don't really have a dog in the fight other than I'm on the board and, you know, I hear the concerns from the neighbors and stuff. But I think, you know, either way, as long as we're being conscious of that hill, because my parents do live on Boxwood, so I go up there frequently in the wintertime as well. And that hill is rough. So yeah, I think as long as we're taking that into consideration and making sure that there isn't enough room to get space, and also as others have said, we're kind of carving out that pedestrian lane as much as possible, because it is pretty sketchy to walk up and down Woodlands because of the speed. So I think, you know, any combination of that, as long as we're keeping those things in mind, will be good.
Yeah, Jeff, would you be able to put together a plan? Because I know, and for everybody else on the call, this preliminary meeting, you know, they take feedback and then they come back with a revised plan in most instances after receiving resident feedback. Could we get another plan with new striping on the street, with those pedestrian walkways, with cushions in areas where it would help, but also give room to make it to the top of the hill? Could we get an adjustment on all that and see what that would look like?
We certainly can. What it sounds like, I mean, would you be interested in any speed cushions maybe down towards the Windy Pine end for people, whether they're construction workers or residents, whoever it is, coming into the street, kind of setting the stage for slower speeds, and maybe there's two sets of speed cushions on that end, and then that's the end of them. And then, you know, then we get back to some of the striping and walkway changes we've talked about. Is that of interest at all? Or
sounds like a better plan to me, because I don't think that section of the street, the front half of where you have the cushions marked, I don't think that's of concern to anybody, because there's really no hill there. But yeah, I think it's the second half on the left, where the concerns are coming in.
And that might.
Hammond, is it possible to get in that the next time we discuss this, to talk about the number of snow days, to actually kind of look at some of the data? Because I feel like this conversation has really been a lot of focused on the snow and ice situation, but that's very few number of days throughout the year compared to just the safety issue of cars traveling, you know, greater than, you know, 38 or 40 miles per hour, as the study's shown.
Well, I realize it's not a very large number of days, but my wife and I, we had our first child and got sent home from the hospital on one of those ice days, and we were unable to get up the hill, if not for another neighbor who was able to miraculously traverse
grace of God, get us up to the top of the hill with our newborn. And
so even though it's not a few days, it's still a safety concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like my fiance works at the hospital and has to be there. They basically tell him you will be working. So if it has an impact on that, it's a concern.
Is there a potential happy medium if we threw a traffic circle at Woodlands Trace? So gives a little bit of room for people to go up the hill, but it also creates a reason to slow down coming down the hill in that area. Is that something that might make sense for does that feel okay to everybody? I'm just, maybe a bad idea, but just spinning, you know.
My concern is when we're coming up the hill on an icy day, we have to blow that stop sign at Maple Song coming up, because if you stop, you immediately slide back down. I'm telling you,
yes.
there's no other way to get up. So if we put a traffic circle there, that's where our car ends up parking for 4 days until it.
Yeah, no, I was saying Woodlands Trace, which is, if you look at the last speed cushion on the left, Woodlands Trace is the intersection before that. It's right after the third speed cushion coming from Old Hickory Boulevard. So that gives a little bit of runway for people to get up the hill, but it also creates a reason for people to slow down coming down that hill. Just
so
like,
putting a round of something there is okay if you're going downhill, but if you're coming uphill, it's a blind spot because there's a hill that the second bump on the left, that one is where the hill comes up the first time and then dips, and there's a turn at the same time. Where you come to the last one on the left is where the hill dips again right before it ramps up to go completely up the hill. So if you on the way down, both of those will help, but going up, they're going to be extremely detrimental in adverse weather conditions.
I would say maybe we take those two and push them just a little bit south. That'd be to the left of Woodlands. That way you've got some run out, as you're coming south, and you got a little run out level spot as you're going north. And it would still slow traffic down, but on icy days, it still gives you good flat on either side of it, is what I'm thinking. So, if you had to get a running start, you still got plenty of time to do that.
To address Alyssa's concern with, if you're coming up from Old Hickory, and forgive me and correct me if I misunderstood. If you're coming up from Old Hickory and you're coming around that bend, could we put some signage there, slow down, speed cushion ahead, just to alert people? So if it's not, to make that a little more, because I even think the signage would help with people knowing that it's there.
Sure. I think that would work. I also question, is this an all or nothing adventure, right? So can we take an approach where you try some things? If they don't work, does that mean we can't do anything else?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's one, unfortunately, just given the number of neighborhoods we're working in and the time frame, and I'll give you some information on the time frame here. It just doesn't lend itself to a lot of trial and error type of things, unfortunately. That's not to say if we put something, certainly if you put something in and it causes a problem, it would be fixed. But if you put something in and you say, well, that didn't quite have as much of impact as we thought, it's going to be hard to circle back. I'll just be honest, back to the street and try something else. So we do get that question often.
Jeff, how do you determine if you put a center line on a street? I'm curious why Woodlands doesn't have a center line at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. There's there are some guidelines, but really the guidelines, which are a national engineering standard, it actually only dictates a center line if it is above a certain amount of traffic. This street does not qualify. However, that does not mean you can't put one on the street. I think you as long as your street's 16 feet wide, you can introduce a center line on the street. So it's certainly applicable. It sounds like that would be a good part of whatever we do here. That would be a welcome improvement. So I've got a note here that whatever plan we come up with probably ought to incorporate a center line, which in this case is just going to be a double solid yellow line.
The volume of traffic in our area, and there's new construction on Boxwood, so there will be more homes and more residents and therefore more vehicles, but also the increase in deliveries, whether it be food delivery, Amazon and personal vehicles, that sort of thing has increased dramatically in the neighborhood. And unfortunately, a lot of those individuals are the ones that are speeding. Probably they're under a time frame to deliver. I don't know. But I wonder, I'm thinking a center line as certainly a baseline to start would be useful. But thank you for that, because I was curious why we didn't have one given the width of Woodlands. Thank you.
sometimes people will argue against a center line for slowing down traffic because they say, well, if we put a center line, that communicates that it is a more major street and therefore, might result in higher speed. I don't think that's totally unfounded. I see what they're saying, but I think in this case, we're sort of triaging here. You have a very unique street with the grade that we'll try things that may not work in other places just because there may not be other options that we would like to do because of the grade, so we can put that center line in and
now it's a drag strip
that doesn't have
we might as well put up the red,
Sure.
yellow, and green. It's a drag strip right now, so anything you could do that would slow it down would be awesome.
Well, this is great feedback. I think just I'll show you this in just a second, but it does sound like we'll come back and do another meeting where you kind of brainstorm on some of these concepts. But to me right now, it sounds like, maybe continuing with a smaller number of speed cushions, especially trying to avoid any kind of icy condition impact. But at the same time, still setting the stage for, you are entering a neighborhood. We are concerned about this. We want you to slow down and coming up with anything we can do to do that. Signage is great. The center line is great. We can put some form of barrier along the outside of those curves, or the inside of the curves to keep people from veering over into that and maintaining high speeds and doing that.
Hey, Jeff, have you actually driven our street and seen the topography in person? Because if not, there's a number of us over next to your last speed cushion on the left that would be more than happy to walk the street with you and show you our concerns in person.
Yeah, I have. It's been a while. My child used to take guitar lessons in your neighborhood, and I don't live very far away from it. So, I am familiar with it. But, when we come out and do our walk through, I'm glad to meet if anybody wants to meet on site and walk that and point out things. Just gotta say, I'm more than happy to do that. Get some contact information.
Awesome.
Let me move on. We can certainly come back to this, but before people have to start dropping off, let me just kind of go through our next step. So we're here at the red circle, the neighborhood meeting. What we will do after tonight is take all of this feedback and go back and formalize this design. We will have a set of design plans for a traffic calming project. And then you see down here in this lower little light blue circle, we say a second neighborhood meeting if needed. Often we'll go to these neighborhoods and they're like, nope, that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted speed cushions. You got it. Let's just move ahead, and we will do that. But we certainly are happy to come back and talk about a more refined plan of approach for that. So we'll plan to do that on this project. After that, assuming we get some consensus on what we've come up with, we will move into an online ballot process. And so I'll say a little bit more about that. That is a 6-week mandatory process. And then coming out of that, we go into construction. We like to say this, it's not often welcome news, but that's where the real delay begins. We're still saying 8 to 10 months if the ballot passes, that would take that long to actually build the project. We've seen some improvement in that. NDOT has brought on some additional contractors. We've seen that drop down to as low as around 6 months. So still not going to happen, by Halloween, you're not going to see it out. But we're getting a little speedier at building these. A little bit about the ballot process. What we will do is send cards out to the property owners affected along the street. And it basically just asks for a little information and then if you're in favor or not. We keep that open for 6 weeks, and at the end of that, we take those results in, and of everybody who voted, if 2/3 of them are in favor of the project, we will move that forward. And so that's how we handle the ballot. We post all those ballot results are summarized online. Most of them pass. Like I think it's above 90% of them passed. So once you get to this stage, you know, the ballot is generally passing, not always, but if not, you can usually tell pretty early on that there's a substantial, you know, portion of the residents who are against it.
Jeff, could I clarify? Does that mean that only
Sure.
property owners on Woodlands Avenue will be voting?
It does. And so this picture, I know it's not the greatest and it's not the complete project, but just try to give you a visual about what that is. We look at all of the parcels that abut the right of way of Woodlands Avenue, and those are the parcels that would be voting. So you can be on a corner. You may have a Woodlands Trace address, and if you're on the corner, as long as your property is adjacent to Woodlands Avenue, you would still get that ballot.
And that's one vote a house, like per property, not per resident, correct?
That's correct. That's one per parcel. You do see the apartments there is one big parcel with one owner, so they get one vote. All of those residents in there are just, they won't get a card. That would go to the owner of that property. They would have the same vote as the single family house across the street. So that's how we deal with that.
How do the 100 or so residences up above this yellow highlighted section get a say in this? Because obviously there will be an impact to everyone else. Is there a potential for allowing us to vote?
It is not. The policy, and this is the same condition on practically every street we do. When traffic calming goes in on the street, it is affecting people other than those who live there. We know that. We've kind of debated the pros and cons of such a policy and have landed on, you know, in order to just, you know, bring that project to a reasonable number of voters and input and so forth. That's how we handle it, but it comes up all the time. Certainly, you know, this used to be a door-to-door petition type of a process, and so there was probably more interaction. We still encourage that, you know, as much as neighbors can get together and talk. And I heard mention of an HOA. That's a great forum, you know, to
part of our problem. Our HOA doesn't include the top of the hill, so.
Same. Well, yeah, in whatever way, but yeah, that is the policy on how we do it, and it is imperfect. First to admit, but.
Do you have any sway in changing that policy, considering how much it does impact? That's the only way for the folks on this hill in or out of the neighborhood.
Is that an NDOT policy, or would that be changed by resolution, by ordinance, or is that within at the director's discretion? Do you know, Jeff?
Yeah, it's an administrative policy, you know, to try to keep on what would be very, very large voting blocks. You know, as you can imagine, we have streets that have dozens of cul-de-sacs off of them, and every one of those people are affected by the street, but they don't all get to vote. And so, yeah, just looking at the world of the projects that we deal with, that's the policy that has been agreed upon. I think Metro Legal has had some input into that, but I don't really think that's anything that couldn't be changed. I think that's just kind of an ongoing discussion. No, that is not an ordinance.
Okay. Thank you for that.
As is, and you may have noticed that this question comes up, we do just send to owners of the property. So if any of these are rentals, that occupant may not receive the card that would go to the owner. That's sometimes a bone of contention as well. But again, make the best decision you think you can. I think that's it. Do we want to? Let me see. There's my contact. Jeff Hammond at birchtransportation.com. I'm the one in green. The NDOT one above looks like a generic, but that's because they have more than one staff member that monitors that email. So feel free to email either or both of us, either of those addresses. if you have other input or have comments or want to connect up and go look at the site, just feel free to reach out to that. I told you I would show you the address if you want to read more about the program, or look at that map, or see the results of other projects, or whatever you want to do. There's a lot of information there. The Traffic Calming webpage.
Real quick, would you be able to bullet point out the points you're taking forward into the next design? I can share that with everyone on this chat, and then it's, whenever that's done, and then they can, like, just keep people involved in the process so they feel that they're heard. Would that be possible while the next design is being put together?
Oh, you mean like send something out by email or something?
Yeah, if you could just email it to me and I can engage with the HOA, and then I can keep everyone on this who's been involved, just so they see, and if they have any further, like, oh, we said this, but like we actually, maybe this was a little more in the line we were thinking, just so by the next time we get to the second design, that everyone feels their input was taken into consideration and heard and accounted for.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. That's a great way to handle it. Yeah, I'll bullet point that out and send that to you, Councilman. Thank you.
Hey, this is Laura Jeffers. I'm on the corner of Plumwood and Woodlands, and I think it's important that the people above me over on Boxwood do have some sort of say or input, just because Woodlands Avenue is the only way in and out of the neighborhood. And we've got $1 million homes up there on Boxwood, brand new, still yet to be sold. And I'm just concerned really if my property values going down, or, I would just like a little more research on that. But just knowing that Woodlands Avenue is our only way in and only way out, it's not a through street like Copperfield has. So I would just hope that we could include people that travel on Woodlands Avenue on a daily basis 100 times like I do.
None of us do, though. I'm assuming this whole incident has come up because of people complaining. So maybe the people at the top of the hill could get together and show a little respect for the bottom of the hill. The $1 million homes.
Jeff, can you put your email back up? I didn't get that.
Sure. There it is. And while that's up there again, I will just say thank you for all of you who have taken your time to be here and to ask questions and show concerns these we deal with in this program. It's a very good representation of your neighborhood, the concern you have for people using these streets and people living alongside these streets. And so thanks for doing that. Spread the message. When we get back together, again, if you're not aware, maybe you don't live on the street, we do send out mailers for every one of these cards. And again, just because we have to limit that in some way, those do go to the owners of people along the street. But in these meetings, we're grateful for all the participation that we get. We want everyone to know about the project.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. I appreciate all the feedback. If you have any questions, please email me. And again, I'll do my best to make sure that you have the information and the opportunity to speak more into the process as this moves along, and make sure I'd like to get to a point where everyone feels their needs are met and people feel they can get to the top of the hill safely, but people who live at the bottom of the hill also feel that their safety is also a concern as well. And I think we can get there. I really do. But I look forward to continuing the conversation with everybody.
Great. With that, we'll wish you all a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.